Last week, Texas Tech set the world on fire with a big NIL check. This week, NIL is all anyone could talk about at Big 12 Media Days.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Live from Big 12 Media Days, welcome to a cross edition of Locked On Coogs, Locked On Utes. Fun couple of days here, busy couple of days here. Lots of people to talk to. Parker Ainsworth, JT Wistrcill. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money, but more on that fun and how to save you some money later. JT, saving money was about the last thing on people's minds this week. It was all NIL based. What'd you take away?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's just so interesting is the differences in what these coaches want, right? Some want, contracts that are enforced long-term. Other ones, they're okay with, hey, just, these one-year deals, and then the guys can get out of. We have the whole situation, not present at Big 12 Media Day, right? But the whole Wisconsin-Miami thing, right? Where the receiver is under contract with Wisconsin, but then he just unenrolls and goes to Miami. So the NIL is the biggest thing they're still trying to figure out, right? This whole House settlement, the Detroit, the other committee that they've now established is trying to look at the legitimacy of the NIL deals too. There's just a lot going on as they try to regulate NIL. I still feel like eventually they will be able to get under control and hold some of it back, but it's probably going to be hard to keep all of it in check. And that's where it'll be curious to see like some of the things going on with Tech. I mean, the offensive lineman committed them last week. Like Ojo wasn't even in, like Tech wasn't even in his top like 4. And then all of a sudden, boom, they just pop up as his commitment too. So it's just interesting to see. And it's interesting to hear how the different coaches view it too, because they talk about wanting to enforce it, right? But if you enforce it, like some of these schools, things are going to change.
Well, and I thought it was interesting. Every single school, all 16, someone at some point said they wanted regulation. They wanted some sort of an even playing field, right, across the board, et cetera, et cetera. No one really was able to define what that means. I feel like that's because all 16 schools are at very different spots in that. Houston's growing. This Big 12 money, super new to Houston. Utah has been in the Pac-12, now the Big 12. Power 4 money is not new to Utah, right? You also, neither one of us is operating with $5.1 million tackles like Texas Tech, right? Like all 16 schools are dramatically different. And I wonder what regulation you could even realistically pick for all 16. Like, they're not the same. They're the same in the football field. We'll talk about parity later because that was another big topic. But in the bank accounts, that's not the way this works, right?
No, it's not the way this works at all. And I mean, the story, Shahan Jeharaja, we both know he wrote a great story on Texas Tech and what they've been able to do with some of their things. We know BYU's put themselves in a new position as well, too. So he said, they say, yeah, I did. Oh, but I'm talking to my favorite Coogs, Locked On Coogs right now. So I'm enjoying that. But yeah, I think it's such an interesting position that we find ourselves in college football, and hearing from these coaches as well too. Kyle Whittingham, I asked him, Utah's coach, about like what's the number one thing that we need to do as a sport right now. It's the biggest issue, and he said get NIL under control. It's so interesting to talk with these coaches. They all blend together at some point. Someone on the main stage was talking about how you can do everything right with an individual. You have a great relationship, you recruit him, it's a great fit and everything, and someone else just offers him more money. And it's like, and that's frustrating.
Well, and I don't think Willie Fritz, specifically Houston, was paying a little bit extra attention when that happened. But like Deion had said something NIL, and I think Gundy said something else. They threw it to Willie, and he's like, I echo what you're all saying. And the more tangible thing to fix may be tampering, right? This idea of like guys are entering the portal and signing very quickly, which indicates there were conversations before they even entered. And maybe that's the first round of regulation. Am I crazy to think that?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that we're, only going to continue to see changes and things that shake out. And I very well do think that's something that you could see very early on and very quickly. So I'm really curious to see what this sport looks like in 10 years, Parker. I mean, what happens? What's the Big 12 like? Which also, are they just going to expand even more? Should we keep the name Big 12? I should ask Brett Yormark that. Should we keep Big 12 the name if we have 16 members? Like, should we also or are we just going to be a thing? Are we going to be like the Big 10? Because I feel like Big 10 just has that ring to it. Maybe you don't want to change it. Big 12 kind of does at this point now too. So, but yeah, the NIL thing is always going to be the biggest thing right now. And hearing from all these different coaches how they view it was fascinating this week.
To be fair, and like I said on Locked On Coogs, I'm sure a couple times at this point because it stuck out to me when he said it. I don't give Deion a lot of credit for a lot of things. I think he gets a lot of overhype, whatever. One thing I do think he was spot on with was Deion Sanders, Coach Prime. Deion said a couple years ago he got to Colorado and started talking about NIL, paying kids, transfer portal, and that was a big no-no. Everyone, oh my God, who is this guy? And now that's everywhere. Yep. Now it's everyone is doing it all the time. It's all anyone talk. It's all everyone opened with at some point here. It's the constant conversation. And to Deion's credit, no one's the villain in that anymore, even though he was the villain for doing that 18 months ago.
Yeah, and Deion is so fascinating. Like even his press conference, he started today with he comes and we didn't even know if he was going to be here originally, but he does end up arriving and he starts his press conference like they wanted to do one thing and he kind of hijacked it and wanted to do his own thing instead because that's just Deion. And the whole Coach Prime thing likes to be called for too. But Deion is so interesting to me too because a lot of things that Deion does, the traditional college football coach is about. For example, like he has his guys playing the bowl games. You look at how he conducts some aspects of his program, and he does want to keep some of that stuff in-house. But then other things, like you look at some of the videos and things that he says too. So he can be all over the board, all over the map. And I'm glad we did get to hear from him. It's always fun to see him in a mix with some of the other coaches. He didn't do any other media, which I thought was a little interesting. But apparently that's kind of normal for him. But this conference is fun with Deion there.
We heard from people in the backstage that he didn't go back and do individual things with them. He didn't do the Colorado breakout stuff. He really just did his 15 minutes of fame in front of everyone and then the coaches roundtable.
No over there. He didn't go over there. He didn't go over breakout.
And so I think it's interesting to see or if he was there, he was not there very long because it was the same time as Willie. Their stages were next to each other and he was not. I didn't see him there. I think that though, when you talk about brands and NIL and building, that's probably because his brand is so big that it's on its own. What else? I've talked about what Prime said. What else jumped out to you about NIL comments and from other coaches? Because there were 16 of them and they all talked about it.
NIL comments from other coaches. Gosh, I thought Sonny Dykes. I don't even know as much about NIL, but he talked about the desire for parity. And he mentioned that 16 teams in the NFL could win the Super Bowl. I disagree with that number, but this isn't Locked On NFL, so we can talk about that another day. But he is right that there's obviously more teams I do feel like that can win a Super Bowl than there are in college football. And I just think it's very interesting from also an NIL perspective when we talk about regulating and all of these things. How much do they want to get this under control? Because obviously the ratings are always going to be better when Ohio State's in there rather than a Utah. It's not as good for the sport, but it is better when the big brands are better. That's just how it works. So I'm very curious to see if we do get what Coach Dykes wants in that parity.
Well, and to that end, we are sitting in the Dallas Cowboys practice facility. This is the Star. It's gigantic. It's cool. It's been a great venue for this. Shout out to the Big 12 for all of that. Also, you mentioned the NFL. He commented that 16 teams going to Super Bowl. I bet if you ask someone in the business side of the NFL in their heart of hearts, they'd want the Cowboys to win more often.
Yes,
right? Like for the bottom line. And I wonder if in college football, in a more capitalistic way of looking at things, if they kind of don't want to fix it because they don't mind Ohio State winning all the time, right? They don't mind Notre Dame being good. They don't mind that because it is good for the dollar. And then you have the scrappy upstart Big 12 guy that comes in and knocks someone out. That's a fun part of it.
It is a fun part of it. And that's what I want to see more. I like upsets. I like parity. I want to see the Big 12 get more teams in. But the question also then is, hey, what about the playoff format? That's something that's also been debated a lot too. 5 versus 11, or do you get multiple teams in? I think that's another interesting aspect that we can talk about in one moment, unless you had anything else you wanted to add on NIL.
I want to talk about parity. I want to talk about 5 and 11. I think that's a fascinating thing, but I think we have something else first.
Yes, we do, that we are going to talk about in one moment, because first we want to talk to you all about the sponsor of today's crossover episode, Locked On Utes and Locked On Cougars, Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finance. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. With Monarch Money, have you just ever looked at your spending and been surprised by how fast it adds up? I know I have. Parker, you agree?
Yeah, when the Final Four run last year, I brought probably a little too much swag at different points.
It's been a bit since Utah made a Final Four run, so I haven't had to worry about that in a little bit. But we all just ended losing track of our money. That's where Monarch Money can help us to keep it organized. You can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, talking about parity. It's been a huge conversation in the Big 12 too, and just also the desire to get more teams in the college football playoff. I don't remember the exact quote now from York, but it was something along the lines of like, we need to get 2 teams in this year, or like he expects 2, maybe it was. And I think it's going to be incredibly hard. Possible for sure, because I think there's a lot of really good teams in the Big 12. I'm just curious of how many of those teams can only have 2 losses. And also, like, I think the Big 12 is better than the ACC. I think Clemson is going to get in, and I could very well see this being a year for Miami. So if Miami and Clemson only have 1 loss in the regular season, and maybe one beats the other in the title game, and whatever team loses in the Big 12 title game, they have that second or third loss. I just think it's going to be hard for the Big 12 to get those multiple teams in.
Yeah, I think that's really, when you talk about multiple Big 12 teams, you are talking about, is the loser of your conference title game good enough to make it over the loser of the ACC title game? This is a human product. Like, the brand will be a part of that. So we'll be somewhat dependent on that. I think for the time being, that's just how this is going to play out. I did think it was interesting, though, how steadfast at first Yormark was, but then really all 16 coaches were about pushing 5+11. Yeah. They all wanted it. And I think I get it in the long term. In the short term, though, I'm worried we're only going to get 1 Big 12 team.
I, as a fan of college football, want 5-11. It's by far the most fair option, in my opinion, in terms of we are going to get the conference champions, 1 group of 5 team. I never want to eliminate the little guy. Like, I don't want it to just be the best teams in the playoff. I think you deserve the avenue for the Cinderella run, even in a sport like football. I think has to be protected. But obviously, the risk is with 5 and 11, you only get. I do think more times than not 2 Big 12 teams would get in. Although I will say, what did BYU end up last year in the rankings? Do you remember what the other Cougs were?
I want to say it was top 15, but I don't recall.
I don't know if it was. I can't. Maybe they were 16 and would have just squeezed in, but it would have been close. So it runs a risk. But at the end of the day, and I think Yormark did say that as well too. Like, he just wants what's fair, and they feel like that's what's best. So they want that 5-11 because that's what's right for the sport too. And I just think the thought of giving the SEC and the Big 10 4 auto bids and like kind of just taking a bow to them in a way, I think just really disgust them. And honestly, I just think it's like I've said so many times at this point, like one of the worst things we could do is just be like, you play in the sport. Like, it's one thing to win your conference, but now just for being a top 4 team you get in, that to me is ridiculous.
Well, and I will say one thing I've talked about on Locked On, Coogs has been in the 4-4-2-2 and then 2 randoms model. There's no guarantee that those 2 randoms aren't also SEC schools. That's still a heavy favorite towards it. Like, at some point, you just got to have to beat them head to head enough times so people understand, like, you're competitive. Arizona State almost did that last year for us, right? Houston, frankly, took Oklahoma down to the wire to start the season, right? I understand the thought process. There's going to be a couple of years of growing pains, though, where you have a 16-team playoff and 1 Big 12 team here, maybe 2 there, maybe 1 the next year. It's going to take it's an uphill battle. It's going to take some fighting. And frankly, this is down the road, future episodes. It might take fighting into like realignment in 31, right? Like, how far down are you willing to go with that?
Mm-hmm. That's what it feels like. It feels like it's going to be a journey and a grind. And I'm just so interested. Like, if we had the model, it's nice to get 2 Big 12 teams in, but I can't give those 4 auto bids. That's the thing I look at the end of the day. And I am so interested and intrigued by what plays out in these negotiations, because I do still feel the Big 10, the SEC have so much power because unfortunately what those brands are. I will say, like, there's that one quote, I think it's Green Goblin talks about, like, everyone loves to see a hero fall and fail. Like, yes, we want the big matchup, but like, how many people hate watch Texas? Like, how many wanted ASU to beat them too? So there is still value in that, even though they don't love it when some of the big teams get upset. Like, gosh, we still talk about how Boise State, I feel like how much do they still live on? I think it's the Idaho Potato Bowl when they beat Oklahoma or something like that. Like, we still love those moments, and I want to protect those and keep those going.
Well, and Yormark, I think, interestingly enough, said on Tuesday that it probably is in the best interest of the conference, or some way of saying it, to have 2 really strong teams every like 2 big brand kind of deals. Didn't directly say you're replacing Texas and Oklahoma or anything like that. And I think the interesting thing about the league right now is it feels like a lot of teams could become that brand. But that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Is this idea of like some dynastic sort of team, some powerhouse. You want a Goliath because then we can all root for David, right? That's the fun of that.
Absolutely. That's 1000% what it is. And there are so many amazing Davids in the Big 12. And that's one thing I feel like that some of the national media, sometimes we look more towards those powerhouse and juggernaut teams, but I love the parity that exists in this conference. I genuinely feel there's 10 teams that could win the Big 12 this year. And obviously, if I said that last year, I wouldn't have put ASU in that 10. So it just shows you what a competitive conference it is, how amazing it is. And they need to be given an opportunity to not just compete, but win on the biggest stage, because I do feel like we are going to see a Big 12 team upset one of these teams in the near future. Obviously, I hope it's a Utah. Houston might be able to do that too in the near future. And, we see it in basketball where Houston is arguably like nearly was a national champion in basketball, made it to the highest stage, right? Like for football, why can't a Big 12 team go on a run? I still think you got to get the right quarterback will be the biggest thing. And that's why I'm really excited for a Utah, like Devin Dampier. I don't think will be that like top 5 guy, a Heisman contender, but like ASU to me is absolutely capable of being one of the big dogs because they have Sam Levitt.
Well, in Houston, you bring in Connor Wegman, but you have Keyshawn Henderson signed 2026. BYU, I know you want to talk about them too much. They just signed a 5-star quarterback. They don't have one this year, but they have one in a couple of years. I think that, whether it's Red Alliance or Keyshawn or Dampier, whomever, you do have those. I saw your Robertson in the Big 12 right now. You got guys showing up that can carry that torch and kind of help lift a team. Cam Scatterbo was kind of that guy for Arizona State last year. Levitt's a great quarterback too, obviously, but like I think in that playoff game he ran and caught a touchdown or something like crazy game out of him. And truthfully, they're a single play away from winning that game on the 4th and 13, right? And so it is that close competition because Texas was not just some SEC team. They lost the championship game at the end of the SEC championship game itself on like a 4th down play at the goal line or something. Like they're competitive. Arizona State competitive. Transitive property doesn't always work, but I think it stands to reason that like we're really close to that happening.
We're really close to that happening. Really close to that team breaking through. I'd love to see it be this year, and I just feel like it's going to happen in the near future. Heck, even if it's BYU, I'm good if they're the ones that do it because we can knock off but I also go back and forth because I genuinely it's like the lesser of two evils in a way. I'm not calling you evil BYU fans, but I'm just saying, obviously you're our rival. I don't think you want Utah to be the first team to win a game, but if my choices were the Big 12 does not win a college football game for the next 5 years, or unless it's it's BYU who wins the one, I want the one to be BYU because I just don't want this narrative to grow that it's only Big 10, it's only SEC. Thankfully, we had a Notre Dame get there last year, but even Notre Dame, that's a big brand, obviously. So that's going to continue to play a role in this as well, too. So I really do feel like we're going to get one of those teams that breaks through soon. I think one of the things that's just interesting from Big 12 Media Days this week, I liked one of the comments that Matt Campbell said, where he said, we added the right teams to keep us at the forefront. I totally agree with that, whether that's a Houston in basketball and an ascending football program that I do think Willie Fritz is doing a great job. I think they're going to produce some good things. They added a team that nearly beat Texas and Arizona State. Arizona as a brand is fantastic, basketball especially right now, but football, I can get right back up. We'll see if it's this year. Utah is a team that is a tough out. Like every year in football, Utah should be a tough out. BYU is becoming that as well. Deion Sanders is one of the biggest figures in the sport in total right now. And I think that's the main ones. I mean, maybe Cincinnati, we're still kind of waiting for them they're kind of the one right now. We'd love to see it in either of the two.
In the last decade, you've had Cincinnati and Central Florida both push the playoff picture. I mean, Cincinnati made it as a group of 5 team. UCF went undefeated and probably should have made it as a group of 5 team.
I would have loved to see that team in the playoff. That would have been fun just to see what would have happened. That UCF team from 2016, correct, Scott Frost? 17, yeah, either way.
But whatever the case may be, like, they're not the current brand in the way that Arizona State or whatever are, but they certainly were recently enough that you have some faith that they could be. The way that the conference as a whole was united and like all for the 12 felt almost like the way you see SEC fans chant SEC at random games throughout the year, right? That was kind of cool to see.
Yeah, it was really cool to see. Like you just get that passion going and the fan bases that ignite. And it really is interesting how it's becoming too, like, Big 12 is starting to unite more as a conference as well. Like these teams rooting for each other and just loathing the SEC in some ways. And I'm someone like, I enjoy, like last year, I thought Ohio State was the best team in the country. So I was like, okay, the best team won it all. Like I thought that was right. But I was so nauseated and disgusted disgusted. And I just remember, if Alabama had gotten in, I would have really just felt like it was a sad day for the sport. Like just feeling like it's just like, oh, so this is just how it's going to be now.
So SMU being Houston's rival make this is kind of awkward, but I think the whole Big 12 was kind of happy to see SMU get in, and Houston obviously wishes it might have been like a different ACC team, just because of SMU being the up the road, rival from the American or whatever. But it did feel like a win for the non-Big Two or whatever you want to call them, because it proved that, like, listen, you can get your conference championship game and take that spot from an SEC school. I will say, and we'll jump in the third segment, I guess, here with this. The only way these two teams would meet this year would be in that Big 12 championship game, where theoretically the loser might get into that. I want to talk that hypothetical matchup for a second. So Houston, Connor Wegman comes in. Biggest question mark is health, right? You also, for what it's worth, have a large receiver contingent that we don't know a lot about because it didn't have a whole lot of passing game last year. Defense was strong last year, top 25 in most categories last year. However, you got a new coordinator, so what's it look like? All that kind of stuff. While we're doing a lot of hypothesizing around Houston, Utah being a theoretical matchup next year is interesting because while I would point out Houston won, it was a close game a year ago. So what hypothetically in this matchup, if they met in the Big 12 title game, loser still gets to get in the playoff, what's it look like on the Utah side?
Oh, no BYU in the title game, no Texas Tech either. Just a couple of, like Houston, that'd be such a great story with Willie Fritz if he could do it. And Utah bouncing back. I know a bunch of people probably loathe Utah, depending on it.
David and Goliath. You're Goliath here.
In football, we would be. And you guys slayed us last year, like giving you guys the credit you deserve. I do think right now, like this matchup, I look at it and I favor Utah. And I mean, Parker, I'm just going to let you have to do a lot of this, but I mean, we're both looking. We have an interesting job, both of us do, defending our quarterbacks and just like their perception entering the year. We'll say the nation seems to be more high on Devin Dampier than they are Connor Wigman, and I just think that's because when you look at what Dampier did at the Group of 5 level, I think the stat was read earlier. I think Kyle Whittingham said he's one of like only 4 quarterbacks ever to put up like the type of stat line he did last year. So he's just such a logical guy to go from G5 to P4, especially when you look at that elusiveness and how he did perform in those P4 games. Like he was really good against the Arizonas and the Auburns. Like he just looked like he was ready for this stage. I feel like he is, and I feel like he's ready to make that step and make that stride. For me, one of the things I look at though is I do feel like Utah would have the better quarterback in that matchup. And just what do you also just think of the way Connor's kind of being treated and talked about just in the Big 12 preseason as we gear up for this?
So I think it's interesting because it is super telling in that, like, we don't really know what we've got here. The kid was a top 3 prospect in his high school class, a 5-star everything, etc. Goes to A&M, big splashy deal. Dave Campbell's, I don't know how familiar you are. Yeah, Dave Campbell, Texas football, put he and Quinn Ewers on the cover. I mean, this is reuniting the rivalry, right? Big deal. We find he has a very bad year at A&M. We found out in January he actually played. He got hurt in like the second drive of the Notre Dame game to start the year, right? And he tried to play hurt because he missed the whole previous season hurt, and he didn't want to miss a second season hurt. It ended up backfiring. It's kind of akin to like Baker Mayfield at Cleveland, right, where he played bad and they got rid of him for Deshaun Watson, right? And he ended up going to Tampa Bay and doing fine after that. And I think that's the Houston's thing is like, if we can keep him upright and healthy, he really does have a lot of these same tools. And I have to say that Houston fans are kind of leaning into that narrative, whereas that's the hypothetical for him, the Dampier hypothetical to me, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this. The hypothetical for him is, can it translate, right? Whereas Houston is like, does he still got it? It's just same kind of question to me, right? As far as like, does he really have it as far as Dampier?
Yeah, and I think it's totally fair because he did throw 12 picks last year. So even though I like what I saw, I think he's really good. It could all not work out that way. Especially Utah does have the offensive line. We like the offensive line. Pass catchers aren't there right now. So if you get in your 3rd and long situations, because realistically, you can't just win every game with a sledgehammer in college football anymore. You have to be more dynamic. You have to use the aerial attack as well. And that's something that is going to be big for Utah. I do expect Dampier to step up. I feel like he's ready for this moment. I think it's nice that Utah starts out with like the UCLA game on the road. First one of the season, I think he's going to throw 2 picks, but I feel like it allows him a ramp up period to get like to that stage where by the time you get Big 12 play, I just think he's going to be ready. Being back with his offensive coordinator, Jason Beck, gives me a ton of confidence too. I'm curious for you with Houston. I mean, I look at only 4 starters back on defense. I look at only 2 starters back on the offensive line. Why do you think that this can come together and that they can make a special Big 12 run?
Well, on offense, you had to replace some guys because you had to get better. So I don't mean to say that it's every position, but certainly some guys some positions need to improve. I think the big thing about Houston to me is, as far as things coming together, this is also in terms of previous season win-loss, for whatever that's worth, a much easier schedule than a year ago, right? You actually have a Stephen F. Austin.
Boy, Utah.
Yeah, you avoid Utah. Actually, on previous season win-loss, this would be the year to play. But anyway, you don't have Oklahoma, though. You get Oregon State, right? You play the Colorados. You do play Baylor and TCU. You do play Tech, but you don't play BYU was strong last year. Iowa State was strong last year. You get a little bit of a break in some of those aspects. You got some good games at home. I think those will work in your favor. I also think, and I've said this about Willie Fritz, the rebuilding processes, get the right guys off the bus, get the right guys on the bus, get them in the right seats, and then you can put it in drive. We're somewhere between steps 2 and 3 there. And he had to get some guys out, had to get some guys in, and now we're kind of figuring out who fits where and moving forward. And I'm excited about where that takes us.
Do the seatbelts work? Like, I mean, how's the brakes? Like, there's a lot of ways that we can go with this. But this honestly, and I would love to, if we're going to see a Coogs in the title game, I want it to be you. Even though it would be sweet to beat BYU in the championship game. I will say that.
A Holy War Part 2. That'd be kind of crazy. JT, final thoughts here. We got a couple minutes.
We have less than 10. We got a warning.
Any last comments as we leave Big 12 Media Days and a little bit to get kicked out of the building?
I want to shout out the Locked On Podcast Network. We are the only ones still live recording right now. There's some TV reporters. I'm not counting them. We are the only podcast or radio network that is still set up. Locked On. We were one of the first ones here, one of the last ones to leave. Literally, they have to kick us out of here. That's how badly we want to talk about your team every single day. We have tons of other conference media coverage. The other shows will too. And we both have so much content that we'll get to release over the days. I want to thank the Big 12 for inviting us here. So awesome. Shout out to our tablecloth. Parker made a little sign here as well for us. So this has just been an awesome weekend. I've said before, I actually played on this field a couple of years ago, high school game. So to be able to come back here was an absolute dream. To be being kicked out of here from a note from the media director, all part of the dream as well too. It literally said, this is your 10-minute warning. It says that on the note. They are ready for us to get out of here, and we will, but not before we thank the Big 12 again and thank Locked On as well for this platform, this opportunity. This weekend's truly been a dream come true.
Yeah, again, this is when you join the Big 12 conference, for Houston especially, right? Coming from a Group 5 conference, like big venue, big event, big names, big personalities, big brands everywhere. That's what you signed up for, right? And so it's nice to be a part of the big time. Houston was left out for about 30 years. And so being back in the big time is a big deal. Locked On Coogs fans, hope you enjoyed the content from the week. And hopefully we meet up in that hypothetical Big 12 championship game. Locked On Coogs and Locked On Utes coming at you live, closing out Big 12 Media Days. Quite literally, go Coogs, I guess you'll say.
Go Utes, baby.